How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Viral Virtue. It's your favorite apostates. I'm McKay.
I am Jordan.
We wanted to talk about something very important today, then that is accompanied by some very viral videos and like a series of videos, but we wanted to focus on the area in which we have expertise. But before we get to that, let's hear a word from today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Earlier this year, we were doing some spring cleaning financially, and we came across a recurring payment for a video editing software subscription that we were already paying with a different account. In this particular case, we have so many email addresses and everything that we couldn't even figure out which was the account that was associated with the recurring charge, and it was pretty frustrating.
If you've ever been in this situation before or you're worried about this, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that allows you to manage subscriptions, lower bills, make a custom budget, and grow your savings all in one place.
Rocket Money is great because it can be used to automatically make a list of all of those subscriptions that you are paying and keep track of them all in one place. You can go through and cancel the ones that you don't want anymore with just a few taps. Rocket Money may even be able to try and get you a refund for some of that lost money that was just going to waste.
Rocket Money has helped members save up to $740 a year when you use all the app's premium features, which is no small amount right there. And they've also helped members save over $880 million in canceled subscriptions.
To save more and spend less, join the over 10 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/Jordan and McKay or click the link in the description to get started for free.
Thank you again, Rocket Money, for sponsoring this video. So this video has been one that I have wanted to do for a while, but it got kind of pushed to the front due to recent events and things that have been trending on TikTok. So there is a creator, I don't know how to say her name, so I will just put it on the screen for you. This is her. She has been doing like a social experiment, if you will, on TikTok, calling churches across the United States to see if they will feed a hungry baby. She calls them, the point being, hey, it's been hours. I don't have money to feed my child. Do you guys help? And predominantly her answer in doing this social experiment has been the majority of churches will say no. There are exceptions to this rule. There were like mosques, no questions asked. Like there was one Appalachian church that I remember that he was like, I will help you. A few Black churches she called were very responsive. And so essentially the social experiment, I think, is highlighting something that lurks under the surface in terms of the church state taxation discourse. But she called the Mormon church in her area, and here's what happened.
So I'm calling your church to test to see if they would help feed a starving baby. And right now I'm going to be calling the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this one is located in Columbia, South Carolina. So we are going to call and see if they would be able to help.
Hello?
Hi, I was wanting to see if y'all could help with a can of formula. I have a 2-month-old and she ran out of formula last night. So she's been going all night and all day without anything to eat.
We unfortunately cannot help with that. Sorry.
Y'all don't help with baby formula or like anything?
I don't, not that I know of, no, sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, in the comments, this was surprising to a lot of members of the Mormon church, and some even going as far as to say, oh, well, there's not somebody manned at the church at all times to take calls. This was probably some member and they didn't know what to do. And that is an opportunity for them to hide behind this layer of lay ministry at the lowest local level of the church. But one would go as far as to say, if their number is listed on Google as the contact point, why would they not be trained to handle it? For one. And two, it doesn't sound like it's just some random person. It's probably sister missionaries from what I could gather.
Probably.
Obviously, there's nothing that I could do to confirm that. But ultimately, they did no follow-up questions. Just, no, we can't help you with that. I'm sorry. And that was it.
I hate to be cynical,
Truly.
in all of this. I don't want to be this person, but my experience in Mormonism and my lived experience being online and knowing people in various churches, this is not surprising to me at all. I don't think the majority of churches in this country like walk the walk in accompanying the things that they say about like what is Christ-like behavior. And so these kinds of things, like I think she's pointing out something that has just kind of been lurking under the surface for a long time now, where I think a good majority of churches do not serve a community need. I don't think they do. I think they intend to. I think how they execute is not the greatest. Particularly like your Mormon churches, your like non-denominational white mega Christian churches. I think those seem to be, in my mind, like the ones where I feel like a lot of what is done is performative in nature and doesn't really accomplish what I think they set out to do in terms of like following the Bible or following the words of Jesus. So this gave us what I feel like is an opportunity to talk about an element within the Mormon church that I think doesn't get talked about enough and is also very important, which is the concept of the church's wealth and the role that poverty plays in the Mormon church and their receptiveness to these issues and things of that nature. And so we've talked about these things before, but this is a much more like conceptual deep dive, which ties in some of my expertise as a licensed clinical social worker and therapist and our experiences growing up in the church, being Mormon, knowing people in the church, having left a few years ago. So this kind of really is a nice tie-in to, I think, a very important topic that we hope you will learn some things and probably be surprised by some of the things that we will tell you today. If you are not well-versed in the church's finances or Mormon wealth or any of those kinds of things, I think this video today for you will be a doozy.
In this particular situation with this TikTok video, it's important to realize that there is a very stark difference between the Mormon church that she's calling and a lot of these other organizations that she's calling, being that most of them are not nationwide churches.
Mm-hmm.
And if they are, they certainly are not nationwide churches running an operation like the Mormon church is. I know a lot of the discourse that has been happening in online spaces and elsewhere is the idea that billionaires are probably not as great as they have been painted to be in the past and that they deserve a lot of criticism. And our hope is that at the end of this, that you will start viewing the Mormon church or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the same light as we are starting to view billionaires.
I want to point out that this is the tip of the iceberg for a much larger issue. So like your average Mormon church member would probably buy that baby formula. I think I could think of a variety of Mormons off the top of my head who would be very charitable and would probably help in these situations. Probably no questions asked. But they're also probably going to put you in touch with the bishop, who will probably then go through the means-tested ways of getting welfare and assistance through the church, if they're willing to help at all, especially if you're not a member.
One of the reasons why I ventured to guess that this could have been Sister Missionary that answered the phone is the missionaries are on like a fixed income or an allowance, if you will. And if you called an average member, they probably would have been like, oh, let me see if I can help you or something, and just go into their own. A lot of missionaries don't have the means to feed anyone beyond themselves, and sometimes not even that. So that's why I kind of think that's what's
not
going
an
on
excuse,
there.
not a
It's
justification.
not an excuse, but I
she
did
could have
want to
easily
make that.
said, let me call the bishop.
Exactly.
Let me give you the bishop's phone number and I'll put you in touch with him. Like, even that would have been better than this.
Right. The fact that there was no follow-up whatsoever is something to be very critical of. Now, this church that she called was in South Carolina, I believe, or one of the Carolinas. But this is starting to create ripples in places in the region at the very least. I came across a TikTok video yesterday. This video was from a creator called Moderate at Best, who was very kind enough to respond to my message and say that they're located in Tennessee. But she received a general email from the stake presidency saying this. There's a lady on TikTok calling... Misspelled. Calling LDS church numbers asking for baby formula. Only called one, but okay. It's a scam, social experiment. There's no baby to buy formula for.
This isn't a scam. She's not getting something from you.
She is recording the negative responses and posting them to paint a negative picture. You guys have the paintbrush in your hand. You're painting the picture yourself. She's just helping you with the
She's
canvas.
just showing all of us what you're doing.
Please don't respond or call back any messages in this regard. President Olson. Now, she very graciously attempted to correct the record and give more context, because obviously they were just making assumptions and didn't know anything. And the Relief Society president responded in the most Relief Society fashion.
Thank you for your thoughts and insights. I appreciate you taking the time to respond and your offer to help. If the need arises, we will reach out. Have a good night.
Which to me reads as, go f yourself.
We don't care.
But this is having an effect on people. And you can see it in the other video responses to what that creator is doing, and people having doing sermons and everything like that.
I made a post on X about how the church should not be funding single mothers who are, and the post just got ratioed to high heaven. And just, how in the world could you read 1 Timothy chapter 5 and then walk away saying, oh, God wants us to just finance fornicators and just pay for women who are producing bastard children out of wedlock? And again, I don't care about your feelings. Facts don't care about your feelings. You know, the Bible is truth. And at the end of the day, I go by what the Bible says. I'm going to preach what the Bible says. And you can whine and moan and complain about it, and you can ratio me on X. It doesn't change the fact that I'm right, because 1 Timothy chapter 5 says that I'm right.
Go over here, stay a week. So, but I'm not one of them preachers. I need to go call the newspaper every time we give out a bottle of water. And I say, we in the middle of feeding people. How you gonna do your little dirty deed? And you know, it's just the spirit of a witch. It's a witch.
I talk a lot about Muslim zakat. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam, where Muslim communities and Muslims are obligated to provide charity to the community. Churches, they are not obligated. We hope that they're going to be able to be philanthropic and donate into their community. And my church has a food bank that I'm very proud of. Churches get scammed all of the time. And so if you think the response to churches saying no to helping baby formula is to tax the churches, we spend $1 trillion a year on our military, on bombing other countries.
But that's beside the point. The members want you to get stuck on the semantics of the specific issue, because it distracts from the glaring issues that would be observable if you kept looking, which is why the stake president is trying to obfuscate the intentions of what the creator was trying to do, and trying to paint a picture of things that aren't actually happening. In Utah, it was reported that it is actually easier to join the Mormon church and to get welfare through that means than it is to actually go through the state to get that welfare. But surely this has nothing to do with the fact that the church has assumed a large portion of the state's burden to provide welfare to the residents that live in the state of Utah. Is this a classic case of no good deed goes unpunished? Or is it a missionary opportunity? The church spends more money on member welfare than it does on humanitarian aid, which is a talking point that anybody will bring up as soon as you start to criticize the church's charitable donations.
Which we will come back to.
Compare this to your nonprofits and food banks in your local area that actually provide food to the general public instead of just members. They aren't asking your religion at the door and not giving you food if you are an atheist or those dreadful Catholics. In fact, just out of personal anecdote, the closest church to our house does a food bank every single Tuesday. People line up in their cars and they just drive right through. They get food, gets put in
No
their trunk,
questions
they go.
asked.
Just saying.
And to be fair, I think that's the way that it should be.
I don't think that they're over here like, do you actually need it? Can I see your bank statements?
Are you paying tithing?
Is there actually a baby who's crying that needs formula?
Are you a scammer? I will, of course, give the caveat, because this is the internet and I'm going to be a prophetess and I will speak this truth and it will unfold in the comments before you. Okay. So here's what will happen is members will come in here and they will be like, the Mormon church donates billions of dollars to charity every year. Okay. I'm going to call that.
Understand.
And then I'm also going to call that there will be Mormons in the comments, if they are brave enough, to come in here and say that they had a very different experience with church welfare. And to that, I will say, great. I love that for you. It's almost like bishop and church roulette exists in every aspect of this religion. However, I will say, as I always say in these circumstances, that your good experience does not negate somebody else's bad experience or does not negate systemic issues that exist in the church that you refuse to contend with. Okay, so I'm just going to caveat that, and then when these people are in the comments, we'll just timestamp them for this section. Obviously, the biggest caveat is everybody's going to have a different experience with the church welfare system. Okay, we're just laying that out there right here. But I want to highlight that you do not generally go to the Mormon church and say, I need food, and then they just hand it to you. This is generally not the experience, whether you're a member or whether you're not a member. Here are some things that have to happen in order to receive church welfare, especially if you're a member. If you are a member, ironically, it is in some ways harder for you to get aid. You have to be paying tithing. I know that sounds ironic because you're going to the bishop because you can't afford food or you can't afford your house payment, but you have to be paying tithing. We'll come back to why that's the case in a little bit. You have to be willing to give some kind of performance of labor to the church. So you might be asked to volunteer. You might be asked to clean some bathrooms. You might be asked to do something else that the bishop has in mind that he needs support with. Like, you're not going to just be given. There is an expectation of you in some cases for some people that you're going to have to do something in return. And then not only that, but you can only receive assistance so many times before they boot you off the assistance in the name of self-reliance, which is also a concept that we're going to get into. But if you're not a member, people are asked to do church-oriented things. Like, there was a news, I remember this a few years ago. I can't include it, but there was a news segment where they talked to somebody who said that when they went to the church for assistance, they were asked if they wanted to join the church. They were told that they had to read some certain scriptures in the Book of Mormon. They were watching church content and church videos. So there's this expectation that if you're going to receive support from the church, you're going to want to engage with it a little bit. Like, they're going to ask you to do some things. And maybe I'm sure there are good bishops out there who don't do this shit. I'm sure there are. But when there are people who are having this experience, this is a problem.
Some people receive assistance from those local leaders in the form of bill payments and trips to the bishop's storehouse, which is similar to the idea of a food pantry, and are not required to do anything additional, which we love to hear that. If you need to feed your family, you should not be
very easy to do.
Right. From a church to get food, it should be no questions asked. Others are told that the storehouse is really more like an emergency pantry than something they can count on, and that they could surely find some way to get by otherwise if they fasted and prayed. Or rather, if you intentionally starve yourself, you could probably stretch your food for longer.
This is insane.
Good luck. Hope this helps.
This is insane. This is barriers to people receiving the care and support that they need. And if you're not going to provide it, just tell them no so that they can go find it somewhere else instead of doing this weird means purity testing that you're doing.
This is literally the food assistance version of thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, good luck. As usual, the surveillance culture that exists within the church also extends into how the church manages welfare. So I was told by somebody who used to work at the church in a connected department that the church keeps track of how many times people are given assistance. Like, each person in the church has their own little profile within the church's system, right? And in there is a place where leaders can allegedly record if assistance has ever been given in the form of food, in the form of bishop storehouse, in the form of financial support. This is all recorded. And allegedly, this is one so that you can't go to another bishop and attempt to get more assistance, allegedly. And additionally, there's a cutoff point. And I don't know what the cutoff point is. I don't know if it's 3 strikes, you're out. I don't know what the thing is. But there is a point that they cut you off in the name of self-reliance because they don't want you to become reliant on the church instead of trying to figure your situation out, which implies that people who are relying on this support aren't doing everything that they can to improve their situation, which I think is a critical thing to name here. In my opinion, self-reliance is the excuse the church uses to be able to justify not helping people in poverty or means testing folks because they're anti-government welfare programs. You're not going to necessarily hear this in Sunday school that they're anti-government welfare programs, but a few years ago, there was some church meetings that were just the apostles, just the heads of the church, the really important guys. Somebody videotaped a meeting that they had and linked it. This was a Truth and Transparency Foundation. Like, these videos came out in 2016 and it was a really big deal.
Shout out Mormon Leaks.
Shout out Mormon Leaks. But during that time, they had an active who was in government senator at the time from Oregon who talked about like government relations and connections to the church and things. And he says a lot of wild things. Maybe I'll include more than just one because he says some seriously bizarre shit. But this one is exceptionally pertinent to what we're talking about right now.
The second principle, the right and control of property. It is my observation, and I'm not here to be political, but it is my observation that those parts of the world that become too socialistic become more and more difficult for our missionaries to find converts. Because the people in those countries look to government to live and not to God to live. I know and have been a critic of the Iraq War, but I also admit to you I voted for it because I felt the Lord's hand in it. I hope it works out, but I can promise you this. You'll never send missionaries to the Arab Street until the rule of law exists in Arabia. And it has taken root in Iraq.
In my mind, this is just a deceptive way to get people to rely solely on the church instead of improving or utilizing government programs that may be beneficial to people. This is especially difficult concept because you think of where most Mormons fall on the political spectrum, and a lot of them, including basically all the ones that I know, have a very critical, not me, but
Lean right.
Oh,
I have to clarify that because it's probably going to be left on your screen.
But a lot of them already have this critical view of people who are on government assistance, such as SNAP benefits or the like, and it's not great. And even some of that ideology bleeds into their pride when it comes to accessing welfare services through the church.
Like, we know from research around poverty and government support efforts that due to the stigma around welfare and assistance, that there are like a ton of money. There's a ton of money wrapped up in unused benefits that could be going to support people, but because they're not being utilized, it just kind of sits there or it gets moved elsewhere. And governments state governments can decide how they want to spend that money, which is like its own individual issue. That's just, a lot of that is just because people aren't accessing it. Like, the money is there, the support is there, but the stigma around it that exists, the shame, the narratives that we've heard for years, you know, welfare queen things to Reagan, like all of these things that are like based in actual no reality and are just stigmatizing and patently false. All of these things prevent people from accessing support that they could be receiving.
There was also an article that was written about how the government uses the church's welfare, like I said earlier, to justify spending $75 million less in assistance to the poor. So they just take that assistance that could be used elsewhere because the church fills the need that they're mandated to fill.
This is why the link between church and state in Utah, like, there is really no separation there. Like, the government is primarily Mormon. Democrats are few and far between. I have this realization while McKay and I were working on research for this video. So there's the concept of self-reliance, and I will include some things that the church has said about self-reliance here so you have an idea of how they're pitching this to people.
The church defines self-reliance as the ability, commitment, and effort to provide the spiritual and temporal necessities of life. Brothers and sisters, Heavenly Father wants you to be prosperous. Heavenly Father does not want to see his children living in poverty. In the words of President Hinckley, and I quote, "I believe the Lord does not wish to see his people condemned to live in poverty."
But in doing this research, McKay and I were just sitting there, and I came to the conclusion that the way the church utilizes self-reliance is no different than the bootstraps mentality. The expectation is that if you're working hard enough, or if you're trying hard enough, that you're going to be able to figure out your circumstances.
If you fast hard enough, if you pray hard enough,
then the solution will come. And it won't be relying on the church. Don't get me wrong.
So is it bootstraps, or are you pulling yourself up by your garment straps?
Garment straps, if you will. But the church won't help just anyone. Sometimes they might, but that's more the exception than the rule. There are certain criteria that you have to meet. There's an expectation that you're going to be willing to perform some labor that's not going to be paid to the church. Many people who participate in the church welfare system feel like they have to earn the support that they're receiving, which in my opinion shouldn't really be something that we're doing. Is that really necessary? If we look at the other food banks and the other way that places around here in our local area and just nationally are structured, are they doing these things as a way of filtering whether or not they're going to support certain people based on these criteria? No, I don't think that they are.
And again, if people are just being given things, that's a fluke, because there are systems in place for members who are needing assistance. When I was a teenager, I would help this man in our ward who needed assistance, and he was disabled, so he couldn't go to the bishop's storehouse to get the food that he needed. So essentially what would happen is the bishop would work with the Relief Society president. The bishop is the leader of the ward, and the Relief Society president is just kind of in charge of the women.
Leader.
But
Yeah.
anyway, we're not getting into that today.
That's a different topic.
So they would work together and essentially look at the budget, because the budget for the ward is also a constraint in what they can give to people who are in need of assistance. And they would essentially fill out a sheet that had itemized, detail out the order at the bishop's storehouse, and they would both sign off on it, and everybody would be in agreement with what was being given and everything like that. So they would give the order sheet to me, and I would drive down to the bishop's storehouse. It's basically like a mini supermarket. They have like shelves set up and like refrigerator aisle and everything like that. So I would get my little shopping cart and I would look at the list and I would go through and get all the stuff that I needed. And then I would take it up to the volunteer elderly couple that are doing a service mission there at the bishop's storehouse. And they would just go through and make sure that I didn't take more or less or miss any items. It sounds like in other places it was not so lax, where they would have somebody accompany you down the aisles, to, which is crazy.
Missionaries sometimes. Like sometimes if the missionaries need a project, they'll assign them to the bishop's storehouse for a day, or, you know, round out the experience, if you will.
And I did that several times because I wanted to help. It was my way of helping somebody out that, needed assistance. And I was a teenager. I had days off during the week. It was, whatever. You compare that to your average food bank experience, or even like the thing down the street from us, it's very different, where they're just handing stuff out. Or I've even seen people in our own neighborhood who just put up shelves and stuff and tables and tell people to come and get what they need.
They're not going to stand out there and like record what you're like. This is dehumanizing on some level.
Truly.
Like
it. And I felt like I was fulfilling I was doing my good deed or whatever. But if I were in that situation, it would be so embarrassing.
People already feel humiliated for having to access these systems, which they shouldn't. But in our society, the way that we structure things, they do. And that's valid given how we treat poor people in this country. Like in my mind, I think about it in terms of like Jesus and like what this experience would look like if the church was like really following the rules of Jesus. And like, wouldn't this just be a very compassionate experience? Wouldn't this be open to the community? Like in my mind, there is no reason that the bishop's storehouse should be exclusive and you have to go through the bishop to get what you need. Like, would it not be a massive community benefit to open that to the entire community, and the entirety of the community comes in where needed? The shift that would take place in perception of Mormons by doing something like that would be insane. It would be the PR move of the century to do something like that. But they won't, because they can't means test people by doing that. And they can't test your intentions or kind of scope out the certain type of person that they want to be giving aid to. They can't do that way.
One of the major commandments that the church teaches is tithing. It's one of the commandments that they teach in lesson 4 when you're a missionary. I was a missionary. If you are a member receiving church support, it is absolutely expected that you're to pay tithing. Paying 10% of your income to the church is not uniquely Mormon. It's pretty common. In the past, a lot of church leaders would refer to tithing over the pulpit at general conference in front of the whole church as fire insurance, not for earthly fire, but for hellfire, which is
because Jesus wants your money, baby.
But the narrative today around tithing is particularly toxic because it's riddled with interesting coincidences and fantastical fables about someone who paid their tithing and suddenly their car started working and they didn't need to take it to the shop,
or they got a job.
They got a new job.
They got a raise.
or suddenly they were able to feed their family when they seemingly were facing hunger. Some leaders have even said that paying tithing over buying food was a way to show faith that the Lord would bless you with the means to feed your family.
No bishop, no missionary should ever hesitate or lack the faith to teach the law of tithing to the poor. The sentiment of they can't afford to needs to be replaced with they can't afford not to. One of the first things a bishop must do to help the needy is ask them to pay their tithing. Like the widow, if a destitute family is faced with the decision of paying their tithing or eating, they should pay their tithing. The bishop can help them with their food.
This is the expectation, and it's been rehashed over the pulpit multiple times that if you have the choice between feeding your family and paying tithing, you pay tithing. And we say this all the time because this isn't something they shy away from.
No.
This is not something they're embarrassed by or they want to cover up. They say this with their full chest.
The recently passed away Russell M. Nelson even went as far as to tell members in Kenya that generational poverty continues from one generation to another until people pay their tithing.
Can you see the smoke coming out of my ears? Is it visible over here? Okay, let's have a little social worker therapist moment. Okay, Jordan's therapy corner for a second. So this is important to me for a few reasons, not the least of which is the implication here and the societal narrative that we have, particularly in the United States, around like what it means to be poor and poverty. So the implication here is people are poor because of something they're choosing to do. People are poor because they're lazy. People are poor because they're incompetent or they're stupid or they, you know, the myth of the Republicans saying that it's the 30-year-old living in his mom's basement playing video games all day because he doesn't want to work. And as a society, we have continually perpetuated this idea and this stigma in subtle ways and not. But something being fundamentally wrong with them, which causes their poorness, and a choice. Like there's a choice being made here, not circumstances of I lost my job and now I can't pay my bills. Not we can't afford to live off one income, but my wife is a stay-at-home mom and we don't know what to do. Like there's like 30 billion different reasons somebody might be in this position, not the least of which is like because they're lazy and they're not doing anything about it. But racism is also a good example of this. And, you know, Mormons are no stranger to racism. We got a whole video about that, but they're no stranger to this here. It's not lost on me that President Nelson at the time, was speaking to a predominantly black population and spitting myths about poverty when the predominant narrative that Nelson has heard probably his whole life, because the dude was born in like the 30s.
Earlier
Reagan, hello. Like during that whole time, the predominant narrative in the United States is the myth of the welfare queen. Again, thank you, Reagan, for being a massive piece of shit. Because there's this idea that the person or the type of person who uses welfare in the United States is primarily black people or black women. That's the predominant narrative that exists. And it's patently untrue. Like the research supports time and time again, the population of people who uses welfare in the United States the most is white people. It's not even founded in anything truthful. It's literally just racism. But it's not lost on me that he's talking about this racist stigma to black people. And we don't even need to get into the imperialism and colonialism angle of all of this that is also at play here. We don't have time for that. That is also relevant. But it just seems, I don't even know if there's a word that encompasses how I feel about this. I'm sitting here trying to think of a word and nothing comes to mind. Here's the point that I want to make. We as a society like to think that there is something like some quality or some tangible thing or behavior that poor people do to stay poor, because the rich like to keep their distance from realizing that these circumstances that poor people are experiencing are really not so far. Like there's a common phenomenon that we like to establish, that there's a lot of distance between us and a homeless person, when the distance is really not all that dramatic. A loss of a job, a few house payments. Like we're really not that far from those experiences, but we like to think that we are because it helps us sleep at night. Right. Allow me to say something that will probably be redundant to the majority of you who watch this channel, but I hope for other people it will be relevant, that you are closer to a financial disaster, homelessness, needing government assistance than you are to being a millionaire or even a billionaire. You are much closer to one end of that spectrum, right?
Not Not as far with a millionaire, but
Not as far.
definitely astronomically far
With
from
a
a
billionaire.
billionaire.
There's a quote. It's from John Steinbeck, and he's paraphrasing a text that I will include in the description that I don't remember the name of. The socialism aspect is just a bonus here, but the rest of it is what I want you to take in. Socialism never took root in America because the poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as a temporarily embarrassed millionaire. And I think this is a fabulous reflection of where we are as a country, because we over-identify with the wealthy, particularly billionaires, when that is ridiculously out of touch for just about everyone. There's your little sociology, social exploration moment around poverty.
Now, John Steinbeck lived kind of a long time ago. And just to paint a picture, he uses the word millionaires here because when John Steinbeck died, there were only 4 or 11 billionaires. The concept was like not even known at that point.
And the
So-
wealth gap, the disparity has only grown by like probably
Astronomically.
significantly since then.
One of the main defenses that you will hear from Mormons is that the church spends so much and does so much in terms of charitable giving, and that's what they use to justify its astronomical wealth. So we wanted to explore that idea a little bit today. On one hand, the church does give more money to charitable or humanitarian causes than pretty much any other organization, and we love that.
Than the majority.
We love that. We are not anti-giving. We're not saying the Mormon church isn't giving enough, so they shouldn't be giving it all.
No, that's not what's happening here.
But I think that I know people might be mad that I'm characterizing Mormonism as Christian, but Christian organizations definitely do stand to be criticized over the money they give versus the amount of money that they have.
In my opinion, this has been my opinion, especially upon leaving the church. The church operates as a business and is a business in a lot of ways, and kind of always has. Joseph Smith had some weird little dreamy insights about like creating his own utopian agrarian Mormon community society thing. We'll come back to that. But I think many leaders still carry this kind of business utopian created Mormon society idea today. The church has had investments for decades. Like even when we were growing up in the church, that's been a thing. And in previous years, they actually explicitly talked about them.
When there was no longer a need for a number of these, they were disposed of. The remaining number are relatively few. I repeat, the combined income from all of these business interests is relatively small and would not keep the church going for longer than a very brief period. I add also that these commercial properties are tax-paying entities who meet their tax obligations under the laws under which of the areas where they are located.
But today, this is not the case. The investment arm of the Mormon church is worth $206 billion and continues to grow. I said billion with a B. I just want to emphasize that.
What? Wait, hold on. You're talking about a church and investment arm.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Church.
They're connected so that they don't have to pay taxes.
Oh,
Interesting. The information that I have for you comes from a report called The Widow's Mite. So I wanted to give some perspective because you hear the $206 billion amount, and that's a lot of money. Conceptually, our brains cannot really even understand that amount of money. But fortunately, especially since the whistleblower report came out in 2019, which we'll come back to that. Fortunately, since then, a lot more people have been paying attention to church finances and including their investments in their portfolio. And so the Widow's Mite report is where I'm going to be sharing a lot of information with you today. So off their website, they identify themselves as a volunteer collaboration aiming to increase basic understanding about the finances in the Mormon church, given the low financial transparency and limited sources that are gathered over time. That are scattered over time. Yeah, imagine that. The church concealing some of these things. So they crowdsource links, information, studies, all of these things based on public information, and they are volunteer. They don't get paid to do this. They just did this based on vibes and information, which I love and appreciate.
And wanting to hold people accountable.
Sure, exactly, which is what we're trying to do on some level here, right? So I have some pretty data to look at for you. If you love graphs and things, you're going to have a fun time here. I try to keep this like very simple because I am not a finance person. I have a humanities, social sciences degree, if you will. So this is not my area of expertise. So trust that this is simplified. This image here is the portfolio, the investment portfolio of the church as it stands right now. So this little graph shows you the breakup of what money, like how much money is structured where. So if you look in terms of percentages of what's the highest, we have stocks and bonds, which of course makes sense, followed by real estate in terms of percentage.
Now, the church continues to steadily increase how much money it is giving to charitable causes. And the reason for that could be interpreted in a lot of ways. But if we look at what happened in 2019 and follow the graph, it illustrates an interesting picture. Now, you can see here for the years preceding, the bars are really low. And the bars really low means that
the numbers are high.
The numbers are high.
Like still
right?
giving a lot in terms of like quantity of money for the average church organization, I presume.
But in comparison to the bars on the right, they're very small. In 2019, a whistleblower complaint revealed that the church's investment portfolio, Ensign Peak, was valued at over $100 billion, which was a bombshell.
It was a bombshell.
And then after that, the Mormon Church made efforts to hide the money that they were amassing in shell companies and fake office addresses. And the church had to pay $5 million to resolve the case.
Because mind you, all this investment money is tax-free because it's an arm of the church. So like they're making all this money off investments and they're not paying any taxes on it. If you don't have a the church position yet, you should because of the Mormon Church and Scientology alone.
I also want to take a moment to mention that the man who was over all of this, his name is Gerald Causset. He's French. He actually used to be my boss for a little bit there because he was presiding bishop for the corporation of the presiding bishop of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Say that 10 times fast.
Which means that he's in charge of the money.
He's in charge of the money and ultimately was in charge of these decisions to illegally hide money in shell companies to avoid taxation. Guess who just became the newest apostle of the quorum of the 12 apostles? That's right, Gerald
He's now one of the 12 apostles of Christ. Would you look at that?
Really interesting. Just wanted to make that point.
So the church claims, like they advise their members, that they are saving for a rainy day.
In that first council meeting, I was impressed by the simplicity of the principles that guided our deliberations and decisions. In the financial operations of the church, two basic and fixed principles are observed. First, the church lives within its means and does not spend more than it receives. Second, a portion of the annual income is set aside as a reserve for contingencies and unanticipated needs. For decades, the church has taught its membership the principle of setting aside additional food, fuel, and money to take care of emergencies that might arise. The church as an institution simply follows the same principles that are taught repeatedly to the members.
But I am confused at what rainy day is going to cost over $200 billion. Like, this has got to be a rainy day of epic proportions. And even if we roll with the, like, oh, it's for, when Jesus comes back and it's the second coming, and it's like, you're telling me that I'm still going to have to worry about paying bills when Jesus comes back? Like, are you serious? Like, be
no, it's
so
for
serious.
The calamities preceding it.
Well, and you think, like, financial crisis, but, like, still $200 billion. Like, even in great calamity, I don't know why there would be this much money needed. Even to further the point, the church is on track in the next few decades to reach $1 trillion. You know who also just got $1 trillion pay package approved? Elon Musk. Tell me why we do not associate them all in the same club. Bill Gates donates money to charity. I'm sure Elon donates money to charity.
The worst person you know probably donates to charity.
People ask us all the time, why? Why do they have this much money? And I don't have an answer for you because I don't know that they're even honest with themselves about why they do this. But in my mind, it's hoarding. It's greed. They want the money. They're seeing how much money is there. And it's just like any billionaire. Like, it's a perpetual hamster wheel of like, how much more money can I get? Because you even see billionaires, which just go look up the difference between $1 million and $1 billion. Like, just go do yourself a favor and look up the discrepancy between the two, or maybe we'll even include a video about the discrepancy between the two. But you're telling me that you have billions of dollars and you are still unhappy to the point that he's running to trillionaire now. He wants to be a trillionaire. There's not a trillionaire on earth right now. But that's where he's running to, because it is a perpetual wheel of I want more money, I want more money, I want more money. They can never be satisfied. And I think the same dynamic is happening to the church, because church members are not immune to greed. Church members are not immune to those things.
No.
And especially if you're making this much money off having to basically do anything. Like, this is the dream.
Right.
They take in money from other people and invest it, and then they make money off that money that wasn't even theirs to begin with. So that sounds pretty enticing, doesn't it?
It stumbles into a lot of different things. I've seen people push back on the idea that they are greedy because no one person in the top leadership stands to necessarily benefit from all that money. I beg to differ, because that amount of money allows them to bully local governments into being able to put temples wherever they want. It gives them status. It gives them fame among memberships. There's a lot of other things that it offers when you're in control of a multi-$100 billion corporation, whatever you want to call it. It's just something to think about, because how would you know what they are getting out of it?
Nobody knows. It's not just to give it away, because they're giving this much of it away every year.
Well, and you just think about it. I think of the small things like Russell Nelson. Russell Nelson got to take stone that was originally hewn for the Salt Lake City temple that took 40 years to construct and use it as his headstone. Nobody else gets that honor.
These people are greedy. Like, that's just what it comes down to. And I know the church members don't want to recognize this, but I think that amount of money would probably change any person. Like, I think we are stupid to think that if presented with that amount of money, that it would not cause some sort of shift in who we are. Because it's just an incomprehensible amount. It fundamentally changes everything. And I know they're not necessarily pocketing that money, but the majority of the 12 don't work. They don't have jobs. Their job is
Not
the
even
church.
the majority. That none of them do.
Their job
really.
is the church. And so they don't have to do anything that they don't want to do on your dime, because they don't pay taxes. Not to mention, the biggest thing that comes up with this for me is, why are members still paying tithing? If you have more money than God, basically, in this instance, you are a literal billionaire headed towards trillionaire. You couldn't spend all that money on something if you probably wanted to. Why are members still paying tithing? Why are church members deciding between paying food and paying tithing? Why is that even a phenomenon that exists in your church culture, where somebody has to be so poor that they're deciding to pay you instead, when you have hundreds of billions of dollars in your investment arm that could be used for whatever the you wanted? Why are kids and parents still paying for missions?
Right.
Missions cost money. You pay hundreds of dollars a month to send your kid on a mission, depending on where they go.
They're paying to labor for the church.
They're paying to labor for the church. Why are you doing that? Why does the church refuse to pay for girls' camp? The church doesn't pay for the recreational activities that the majority of the kids do. Parents pay for those things. So explain that to me of why you're doing that. Why are they doing that? The richest members and the poorest members are tithing into an institution with over $200 billion. It doesn't make any sense to me. There is no justification that you could give me that would make me think that this would be okay. This should be if you want to pay tithing because it feels faith affirming and you feel connected to God for doing it, then great. But it's no longer a requirement. In my mind, you have that much money in the bank to use on whatever you want. It is absolutely asinine to expect your members to continue to fund your investments.
Well, even in the past, the distant past, before the church was rich beyond all belief, Joseph F. Smith said that they would not need to pay tithing forever, because eventually they would have sufficient for their needs. So have we met the threshold?
Sufficient just keeps getting kicked down the path.
Sufficiency, yeah. What is sufficient? Very nebulous idea.
I think this amount of money would break Joseph's brain. Like, this would be inconceivable to the founding prophets of the church.
Now, as previously mentioned, a big portion of the church's investment portfolio is real estate, which I feel like is something that seems to go a little more unnoticed by the general public. A lot of people know about Ensign Peak advisors and everything like that. But I feel like we should talk about the real estate aspect of it all. There are more obvious reasons for the church to have real estate. Obviously, the church needs to be in a place physically in order for there to be a meeting house. They need land for temples. They need land for their stupid phallic office building in Salt Lake City. But it goes beyond that. The church is allegedly the second largest private landowner in the United States. They own land in all 50 states. Obviously, there's churches in all 50 states, but it goes further than that. In most states, if you look at the list, you'll probably find things just beyond church buildings that the Mormons own in your area. They have apartment complexes, homes, warehouses, business offices and business parks, empty lots, you name it. Among the most interesting, the church owns 1.7 million acres of farmland.
I just want people to sit with this for a moment, because I think for a while people thought that Bill Gates owned the most land. I don't know if he still does. Is he still the number one? Irrelevant here. But to be in the same sphere, like the Mormon church is in the same sphere as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in terms of money, and Bill Gates in terms of owning private land. Like 1.75 or 1.7 million acres of farmland. Like the Mormon church owns more farmland than 98% of people. That's crazy to me. That's crazy.
99% of people, really.
Fair enough. That's nuts. I wanted to use like a case study or like almost an example, if you will, because we talk a lot about the money and we talk about a lot about how like $200 billion, that's so much money. And like, there's so many things there, but I feel like it's hard to like put into like a regular person's brain because I can't even conceptualize billions of dollars, right? I wanted an example. Like I wanted something concrete that we could look at in terms of when the church gets involved, what are they doing and what's happening? And the best example that I could give you of that is Florida.
Hey, Jordan, what's that organization that has like a cult following that has like a stupid amount of land in Florida?
Oh, Scientology.
No, they only have like 300 acres in like Clearwater. That's not who I'm thinking of.
Disney?
No, they have like 30,000 acres with
30,000
Disney.
is a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a lot.
No, the Mormons. They have 679,000 acres in the state of Florida.
30,000, 679,000. Like that's why they own 2% of Florida, people.
Just think about that compared to Disney. Disney has its own
Disney's
municipality with police and everything. Like we're talking 679,000 acres of land. That's bigger than some counties out there.
Mm-hmm. Before we go into why, obviously that fact right there is an excellent reason why we need to talk about Florida. But I want to give you perspective in terms of membership because I truly don't know. And I would love for y'all to hypothesize why Florida is their like most prized possession.
It's the jewel of Mormonism.
It's like the jewel of Mormonism at this point. So in terms of membership, like I just want to give you perspective. So Florida's home to almost 180,000 members and around 280 congregations. And so Pew Research says that Mormonism represents about 1% of the population. So like not anything crazy, especially when you think around like about Utah, which hovers around like the 40%-ish, like 45 to it's less than 50 now. It's gone down in recent years. And then Florida's home to 3 operating temples. We've got Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, and Tallahassee, which on average, the average cost, according to the Widow's Mite report, is $20 to $30 million to build each temple. That's a lot. And then we have the Tampa temple that was recently, they just started construction in August of this year. And they recently announced that they're about to break ground on the Jacksonville temple in January of next year. So there's a lot of temples going on in Florida right now.
Yeah. Now that we've given you some context with Mormon presence of like membership.
It's not a crazy amount.
No, it's not. Really,
there's not like a lot
crazy.
of Mormons there or anything.
Let's talk about what the church is doing in Florida, because clearly the church isn't taking up 750,000 acres in just meeting houses and temples.
So if we go backwards in time a little bit to previous church prophets, we've got David O. McKay in the 1950s. Interestingly, not McKay's namesake.
Thankfully not. No relation to my namesake or anything like that.
But interesting nonetheless. So David O. McKay was prophet of the church at the time, and then he had a first counselor who was Henry Moyle. So Henry Moyle was a cattleman who suggested to the first presidency that they should start a cattle farm in Florida because he said the climate in Florida in terms of like cattle and ranching and farming is ideal. I'm not a farmer. I don't know whether that's true or not. Seems to be the case.
Ranchers, sound off in the comments.
This dude was also very interesting. I don't know that we should have been taking advice from this man. Like clearly this one, you will see that this one paid off. But he also did a bunch of other random stuff. Like he wanted church headquarters to be massive, and he was doing sports leagues where you couldn't play with the Mormon sports people unless you got baptized into it. They're calling it like baseball baptisms or something. Very weird and
Wait,
bizarre.
is the church headquarters, that's the headquarters that he wanted to build?
This was the 50s, so I don't know, was that built then or not?
It was like the 70s that it was
really?
built.
I don't know then.
Hmm.
But he
Maybe,
probably
maybe
he
he
had
was
a
the one that
role.
wanted the phallic design. Who knows?
Maybe. But this dude also ran up a massive deficit, and apparently David O. McKay like relieved him of his administrative duties because he was like doing shit that he wasn't supposed to do. So nonetheless, this guy decided, hey, we should start a cattle ranch or a farm or do some kind of farming in Florida. And they would go on to do just that. They started planning this in 1949, and then in 1950, they purchased 45,000 acres of land that would become what is now called Deseret Ranch in Osceola County, Florida. Since then, it has expanded to it is now over 300,000 acres and is the world's largest beef ranch.
Today on their website, the Deseret Ranch's website, they report, for over 70 years, we have helped supply safe and nutritious food to stores and pantries across the nation, emphasizing at no cost to the taxpayer.
You see how we always come back to this idea of they don't need no help from the government. They don't need no government assistance.
We don't need no assistance. The church heavily emphasizes that they do not rely on the government at all, and they are very antagonistic toward people who are relying on the government assistance as well. I truly believe that part of why the church does these welfare efforts is in part to prove that they don't need to rely on government to meet the needs of the people, and they want society modeled after their efforts. This is a rather interesting idea that they hold near and dear to them, considering that they rely on tax exempt status. But whatever, we're not going to call that government assistance. Whatever.
I also think, I don't know, maybe this is conspiracy laden, but I also think this is particularly sinister because what I think they're pointing out here is that they are a wealthy religious organization that meets the needs of their people without relying on the government. And they want society to be modeled after the same thing. And so governments can take note from what the church is doing. And they want that because the connection to government or Mormons getting involved in government means one thing, and that's more power. And so I think this could possibly have a very icky, sinister motive to me, which is especially when they're like buying up all this land. And if there was like a great calamity and the government needed to rely on the church for some things or to resolve some issues or for money, like that puts them in a very elevated position of power. And that should be concerning to everyone if that is what they're doing. Just like everything else, the church refuses to share financial information about the ranch.
Love that.
Is this surprising to anybody? No. So the only data that I was able to find is from 2000, where apparently they moved 16 million pounds of calves, which allegedly translated to $16 million in revenue. And that was all the way back in 2000.
It surely has changed since then.
It's certainly possible they've even
Increased.
expanded since then. I wanted to talk about Deseret Ranch because, like, not only is it massive, it does a lot of things, but, like, this might be controversial, but I told McKay this the other day when I was doing research about Deseret Ranch. It's kind of woke. There are some very woke aspects to Deseret Ranch that, to me, does not at all coincide with the very right-leaning anti-climate change, anti-environmentalism nature of Mormonism.
This entire operation is run quite masterfully by the church in a way that I hate, because you have to give them credit that they're
not dumb.
They really know their
They're not
stuff.
dumb.
It's crazy. And not just in like a working sense, but also a financial sense.
They pay the right people to figure these things out and structure it for them. That's for sure.
The short version, because it's getting into realms that I don't even technically understand, but the condensed version is that the church owns two entities: Farmland Reserve, Inc., a nonprofit organization that buys and holds the land, the ranch land, and Ag Reserve, Inc., that is the for-profit incorporation that manages and like runs the ranch, not just Deseret Ranch, but other ones in the country. The land that Farmland Reserve, Inc. buys is bought in cash. They don't mortgage this. They write checks.
They don't need to.
And they lease that land, with the land that they're not using, to farmers. So they're getting passive income or at least enough to cover the property taxes for these properties, because they are not strictly for religious use. They are not exempt from property taxes. But I mean, they're doing all this in a way that's offsetting their expenses. They're maximizing their tax benefits. They're finding loopholes and things like that so that they can keep growing their investment, because this is for long-term investment. This is not, as some church leaders have alleged.
The assets of the church are primarily income consuming. They are not income producing.
I will also say that this is not a new, like Henry Moyle was the one who apparently inspired this, but this is not a new idea in terms of the church. And I think they've all kind of adopted this. Like even Gordon B. Hinckley during his time believed that like farming was a safe investment. And he didn't shy away from even talking about like owning the farms, which I think today is something that they just generally, like the church just generally doesn't talk about finances. Like they'll do a report at conference with very limited information that's probably skewed. And that's the most that you hear about it.
Does the church own substantial farm properties, as some have indicated? The church does own a number of farm properties. As you know, we have some welfare properties whose produce is used to supply food for the needy. These are operated strictly for charitable purposes and legally qualify for tax-exempt status. Then we have some commercial farm properties. I spoke earlier of the reserves of the church. Prudent management requires that this money be put to use. In that process, we have purchased and hold some good, productive farms. They are well operated under capable management, and they yield a conservative rate of return. We have felt that good farms over a long period represent a safe investment where the assets of the church may be preserved and enhanced, while at the same time they are available as an agricultural resource to feed people should there come a time of need.
So in addition to their estimated 45,000 head of cattle, ranch farmy people sound off in the comments. I know that's probably a lot. They have various other things that is happening at Deseret Ranch as well. So they have orchards where they grow citrus. They lease out their land to other farmers to grow crops. According to their website, they have over 1,000 acres of productive farmland under irrigation. Additionally, based off the information on their website, they also, as part of the Deseret Ranch expansion a few years ago, they bought a bunch of land in the Panhandle from another wealthy private owner family that had like a bunch of timber. Like it was like a whole timber operation. So they also harvest timber. They grow turf sod, and they also mine shell material from fossilized seashell deposits, which I guess is used for road beds. Like it's the base of roads.
Okay.
And then they also have a wildlife management program that's overseen by a biologist. So now we're going to start to get into why I think Deseret Ranch is kind of woke in terms of sustainability. Now, I will give the biggest caveat. I am not an environmental scientist. I do not have a bunch of knowledge in like conservation efforts beyond probably the average person. And so I'm going to share with you some of the things that Deseret Ranch does and talks about on their website in terms of like staying sustainable, I think, to kind of dispel criticism. But to the average person, this might be like it could just be all greenwashing. They could all be just doing bullshit, and it doesn't actually make any difference. So if you are an environmental person of knowledge or have information about any of these things, feel free to sound off in the comments, and other people go down and read them, because I would be very interested to hear.
You'll find the word sustainability and sustainable efforts all over their website. They are constantly rotating grazing pastures in a way that allows the plants to regenerate without having to change the ecology. They have enough solar panels to power all of the ranch's needs, and they even produce a surplus that they sell back to the electric companies and, get a little kickback for. They also have cutting-edge water infrastructure, supposedly, that leaves water cleaner when it leaves the ranch than when it originally came through, which is impressive. They do that, I think they were talking about, through this, 500-acre island on this wetland.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with irrigation. They have some very cutting edge irrigation things in terms of watering plants, so they're not using too much community water.
So it does appear that they pride themselves on conservation efforts and sustainability.
Which is the antithesis of
Right.
Republican politics.
Right.
If I may. And the average Mormon is right-leaning. So this was just very wild to me. So for every taking or producing focus on their website, they answer to it with sustainability. So like in terms, for example, if they're harvesting timber, which they talk about on their website, they talk about how they use natural regeneration and how even if it takes them longer, that's the method that they use. If they're growing sod, they're growing the kind that's water efficient that Floridians are looking for in terms of conserving water in their neighborhoods. If they're mining shell material, they talk about how they restore the area and they turn it into lakes and ponds. If they're farming cattle, they talk about how they use horses instead of vehicles and they implement rotational grazing to reduce greenhouse gases. So like, to me, it like either whoever's running this is like super passionate about sustainability and it just has like a weird offshoot compared to their like political beliefs, or like a PR person ran them through the criticisms that might come of having a ranch of this size. Because it seems like every area where I was like, they have an answer to it. So are those answers not like making it so that they don't have a negative impact still? No, not necessarily. But I do appreciate that they're mitigating some of these things because I would look into this and assume that they just didn't give a shit. So this was like a pleasant surprise reading about these things.
Just as an aside for the impact of cattle ranching and farming, cattle are the number one agricultural source of greenhouse gases worldwide, and cows actually take up nearly half the land in the U.S.
Half of our land is cows. That's nuts. The rest is owned by the
Insane,
Mormons.
right? Ironically, despite sustainability efforts of Deseret ranches around the wetlands and their property, animal agriculture is the leading polluter of rivers, streams, and the second largest source of wetlands contamination.
So
Love
this is
that.
where I love the sustainability. I'm not going to be a hater on that because I think they're doing more than they could be there, which I appreciate.
And obviously they're ranching because there is a demand to be met, right?
This is like a much larger conversation, right? But like I look at some of this, especially around like the wetlands and stuff, and it's like, I told McKay when we were researching this, it kind of feels like the idea of like, we prevent forest fires by starting them and keeping them contained over here. We're polluting the air and like we're burning the stuff that's on the ground and like it stinks in our area now. And so like there are definitely other environmental considerations I think to be had just from all of this. Additionally, when I was doing research for this video, I stumbled upon a report from the Environmental Protection Agency about
EPA,
the Mormons.
That darn government.
So in my research, I found it started with one document that I will include here, where, from my understanding, this is a consent agreement, which means that the government, the EPA, and the organization that is being fined has decided to settle the problem out of court and just pay a fine. That's what seems to have happened here. I'm not a lawyer, so giving that disclaimer, allegedly. But this is signed and dated by the church president and the owner, like the president of Deseret Ranch here on the bottom, you will see. Essentially, the allegations are pretty intense. Like the EPA is accusing Deseret Ranch and like all their little affiliates under their name of essentially like dumping pollutants in the wetlands on their property and like multiple different places.
Yeah, particularly dredge from their farmlands, right?
Which you're not allowed to do, or at least not without permission and permit.
Yeah.
And so apparently this went on for numerous occasions, and allegedly they were fined and notified about this behavior, like preempted with a fine and notified that this behavior wasn't okay also multiple times. And so they ended up being fined for this behavior, basically. So like to me, I'm like, when you're getting fined by the Environmental Protection Agency, the sustainability stuff just starts to feel like it's flying in the face of like everything that you've done up to this point.
Especially now, obviously, this is not very legally correct or whatever, but a church that has more money than God and a law firm to match just decided to settle. That sounds like a losing court case, if you ask me.
Well, it does. I mean, the church usually fights pretty much everything, I feel like, that comes their way. And they have massive legal power. Curtin and McConkie is their law firm. We've talked about it before. And so I have no doubt that. Additionally, I also wonder if they were trying to keep this out of the news cycle, because in all of the research that I did on this, there was not a single news article talking about these violations. Like, they're literally polluting the wetlands that they also claim to care so much about in their videos on their website. And they talk about the wetlands and the animals that are like home to the area and like conservation efforts and all these
Right.
things, and then being fined by the EPA. And so in this, I also found that not only was there this document example, but there were 3 others. So the 4 in total of all of these documents with these violations were over $800,000 in fines that they agreed to pay, according to these documents, to the Environmental Protection Agency. But I need a reporter, I need a journalist to grab onto this, because I think this is worth talking about. Like, they're all up in our, like, they've got sustainability hung over every head at Deseret
Right.
Ranch, but then, like, these things are going on. Like, I think you need to be held accountable for those things, and not just by the EPA. Like, I think the public should be holding you accountable too.
The church states that these farms provide food for their welfare support and humanitarian aid. A lot of these products that they make, you can go into the bishop's storehouse, like I did, and you can find them on the shelves in the fridges and things of that nature.
Truly, like, owning the means.
Yeah, they really do own pretty much. They have the production, they have the packaging, which packaging is largely volunteer work. Talk about the cannery another time. But this is not the full picture. There was a Guardian article that stated that in Central Florida, the church's Deseret Ranch is understood to sell cows to Cargill, a Minnesota-based trading company, and oranges to Tropicana, as well as renting land to hunters and other companies.
To me, they don't, like, in the Guardian article, the person who wrote the article, and I'll link it in the description, reached out to the church for comment about these things, and they refused to comment and said that they don't talk about the financial dealings of the ranch. But this is understood to me. There is no way in my mind that they are doing this just for the welfare, because they don't make any money off of that. They don't make any money off of that. So they're looking for ways to optimize funds. That's very clear throughout their entire investment portfolio, right? Like, they talk about farming. Gordon B. Hinckley talked about farming as a safe investment to continue to grow church funds, right? So, like, that's the point. So, like, why are we hiding that you're selling cows and you're selling oranges? Like, why are you hiding those things? And you're obviously selling the timber. I know you're not keeping the timber. Maybe you're keeping some of it and, like, hoarding it away somewhere so you can build your weird city. But, like,
maybe they're using, well, I don't know if they can process it or anything to use it as building material, but who knows?
Like, so why are we pretending that we don't use this for other purpose than just welfare? Because the church members will argue with you about this and say that that's not the case. My point being, the ranch, albeit better sustainably than other things that they do, and albeit I have more respect and understanding for this than other things, it's not a profitless humanitarian venture. It should not be presented as such, because that is not what they're doing. I want to connect some of the other things that are also happening in Florida. So in the last few years, the church, just to give you like a picture of wealth in terms of like what's going on. So the church bought a $179 million industrial park recently. I think this was this last year or the year before. A 315 unit apartment in Plantation, Florida for $133 million, and a 284 unit apartment complex in Palm Beach County for $102 million. So like this idea, again, like if you stay in the little ranch side of things where it's like, cool, things are sustainable, and then they're giving money back to welfare, and like, that sounds really good. But then like you look at the rest of the picture and it's just not giving the same, right? It's just not giving the same. One of the most concerning things that I found out about that's happening in Florida is in 2015, they proposed a city. So the church wants to build a city in Florida on part of the land that they own. Some of it sequestered for Deseret Ranch, like some of it in there. And there's been some interesting like back and forth with the government and city council about their intentions, and they're being kind of skeezy about things. So in this Guardian article that I will link, it talks about some of the things that are going on here. So they want to transform this land into an entirely new city, home to as many as 500,000 people by 2080.
500,000 people.
500,000 people by 2080. So they're saying nothing's going to be built here for a long time, for decades, right? But they want to plan for urban growth in the area because it's inevitable. Some criticisms to be aware of with this. So in interviewing people about this, these are some of the things that came up in this Guardian article. This is not a typical housing development. It is an entire region of the state of Florida, and it is its last remaining wilderness, said a landscape architect in Orlando and a member of the Florida Native Plant Society. It is, she stressed, a plan on an unprecedented scale. This project impacts the entire state ecologically, which makes a lot of sense given the size of Deseret Ranch and the sustainability efforts that they claim to have been doing this whole time.
For years, environmental groups protested that it was too risky to build so much on such ecologically important land. particularly in one of the few areas where Florida hasn't. We fought it and fought it and fought it, said Vaudry, who described it as nothing less than a David and Goliath struggle. Except this time, Goliath was part of the property empire of the Mormon Church.
So all sustainable and whatnot until we're squashing the voices of people who are criticizing how this is going to ecologically shift the entire landscape of Florida. So in this city, this fully functioning city of 500,000 people, I wanted to show you what it includes. So we've got new office blocks, civic buildings, high-rise hotels and apartment buildings are among the structures anticipated, along with new schools, a hospital, parks, and a university and research campus. New motorways and rail lines would connect it all to Orlando and cities along Florida's eastern coast. That is insane. Like it's not just like we're creating a small city with some houses and a church building here. Like they're literally creating an entirely new city.
They saw Clearwater and they're like,
let's do that.
Let's show them how it's done.
Just to drive home the display of wealth while this is going on, and this is going to be a project that extends decades, right? Like this isn't going to be done until 2080. Half of us might not even be alive by the time they finish this shit. But meanwhile, the church is developing land in another area in Orlando, which is described as a, quote, city of the future with super fast internet connections, one of the top private golf clubs in the world, and homes ranging from luxury apartments to sprawling estates. And I have a nice little rendered photo for you so you have an idea of what we're looking at here. This is wealth, man. When I think about the money the church has, this makes sense right here. But isn't this just a glaring, like, when you look at the Mormon church, my point is you have to look at the full picture, because if you don't, then you miss this. Like they've got Deseret Ranch, but then you look at this that they're building over here, and these are luxury apartments. The average person is not going to be able to afford this. People are going to be priced out of this.
So we use Florida as an example of wealth on display. How does this $1 billion project of luxury apartments help the poor? I'm not sure, but Mormons will find a way to justify it. I'm sure of that. Just because the Mormon church does good or charitable things does not make it good or charitable. If I offered you a penny, which, rest in peace, the penny.
We don't have pennies anymore.
And you knew how much money I had, does it make me a good person? Especially if I only started giving you this penny after the government came after me for hiding it.
I want us to stop pretending, and this is not me, I don't fall into this category, but I used to. I want people to stop pretending that the church donating millions of dollars makes them an ethical church organization that cares for the poor. Because it doesn't. It's simply not the full picture, especially when helping the poor pays no mind to the ways the church is explicitly and implicitly harming its own members via homophobia, transphobia, sexism, racism. Like all of the church members are more concerned with, well, the church spent billions of dollars last year on helping the poor, but we got LGBTQ kids killing themselves in our ward. I'm like, what? Are you serious? Like, there's people hemorrhaging in your own ranks, and you're over here focusing on how humanitarian aid makes you an ethical organization? Nah. No. This requires using your brain and critical thinking a little bit deeper, which most Mormons are not willing to engage in. But like the point that I made earlier, there are plenty of billionaires who donate to charity. Does Elon Musk donating to charity make him a kind, ethical person? Absolutely the not. Saying the church donates millions or billions or however they're feeling that year to keep the masses placated is a form of thought stopping. If the church is donating money, everything said by someone who is critical of church finances is dismissible because they are in fact charitable. Like if somebody comes out here with criticism of church finances, they're like, well, the church donated $6 billion last year. Like that will be the entire conversation. You will probably watch it play out in our comments. This is the only retort they have for these kinds of things. That's it. So I want these people to examine why the church won't pay for programs that benefits the members. Why aren't we paying for the programs for the youth? Why aren't we paying for girls' camp? Why does the church means test its own members if they feel like they're not doing enough to earn their assistance? Your own members! Your own, God-fearing, honest and humble people. You're means testing your own people. I'd expect you to means test the average people because you don't know them and you're going to means test them because you think they're not worthy. But your own members? Ask yourself why poor people who can't afford food are still paying their tithing. These are all questions that cannot be whisked away by the fact that the church donates to charity.
Let's put it this way. If the church did not donate this money, they would have no excuse to justify the exorbitant wealth that they have amassed. While I believe that a good portion of the members are charitable people, donating this money is PR and a means to an end for church leadership. It's performative, and the money stays concentrated at the top for the majority white men to benefit.
Again, members are closer to poverty than they will ever be to the amount the church has. We are closer to poverty than we will ever be to what the church has. And they aren't ready to give it to you when you need it either. Like, that's not even part of the equation. Like, they're giving you a hard time about getting that money when you actually are demonstrating need. But nonetheless, I'm pretty sure Jesus said to care for the needy and the poor. Like, if we're going based off of people being Christ-like, right? Like, I'm pretty sure that he said that, and not to become a trillionaire by 2080 and then give some of that money away, but keep hoarding the rest. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not what Jesus said. Like, I'm pretty sure the Jesus that I read about growing up is not the same Jesus that would be like, yeah, hoard it. Who cares? Like, I don't think that's how that conversation would go. And I'm not even of the belief that the church needs to donate 90% of their money. I'm not even of that belief. But it's not proportional. It's not proportional. And to me, it is a placation of people like us who have criticisms of the church and a way for Mormon members to thought stop themselves before thinking critically about church finances.
The Christmas season is fast approaching, and the church is inevitably going to be opening up their giving machines as they do every year, where you can go to a vending machine and be far removed from charitable giving by putting your money in this machine and purchasing a donation for people overseas, and you can take little Instagrams of it.
I think this is the most performative example of donation of all time.
And I would not, you're hearing it from me right now. I am sure that there is going to be an option to donate baby formula in those giving machines this year because of
if they haven't already made them.
Right. They're going to be doing something like that so that they can shirk this PR disaster that has been created out of a small little social experiment on social media. It's all just PR, and it's all about the money.
It's all about the money. You can't get away from it. You can't deny it. You can choose not to critically engage with it, which is what most Mormons do. And that's why I won't engage with people who approach it that way, because like you are too invested in maintaining the perspective that you have of this. And I would have to sit there and like pick apart all the unconscious and intentional things that you have that contradict the reality of the situation. And that's just way too much emotional labor for me on my end to try to get you to think any differently than that, because you are invested in maintaining this perspective of why the church has so much money. Because if you have to sit there and think about why the church has so much money, that's not a very comfy topic. That's not a very comfortable place to be. It's like the truth claims, and people are like, no. I stay way far away from the truth claims. I think the majority of Mormons stay way far away from church finances, beyond the one claim that they all dispel out the second these kind of things comes up about how much the church donates in terms of money. My point here being, stop looking at the church as a charitable organization. It's not. Start treating them like we are seeing the shift in how we treat billionaires and the perspectives that we take with billionaires, because they are no different.
Right.
They are no different.
Explain to me how this is any different from private equity.
It's not. That's the thing. It's not. And therefore, we need to be like, they hide under the shield of being a religious organization and tax the fucking churches. Good God. I'm not even talking about your average church, like your average community church who probably does not make that much money. Okay. I'm not even talking about them, but if not anybody else, like look at Scientology and Mormonism as the perfect example of like, just more money than God, constantly generating more money on more money on more money to the benefit of no one, to the benefit of the elite. Like there is no difference in how we look at billionaires in terms of them being elite. Mormonism is no different. The 12, the prophet, the first presidency, they are the elite. Mormons are the proletariat underneath that are constantly getting exploited for like 50,000 different reasons, not even financially. So we should not be treating this discourse any differently. But they get to stay behind their shield of being a religious organization. What I'm asking you to do is pull the shield down because it's transparent. There's nothing there. Them being a religious organization who occasionally donates does not skirt any valid criticism that I have given or offered you today. Okay? So I want you in your online spaces, when these things come up, I want you to be part of spreading this discourse. Okay? people are always shocked. I just saw a clip the other day where somebody was like, I thought Bill Gates owned all the land, but apparently I looked it up and it was the Mormons. What the is that about?
Right.
Like, that's what I need. I need more of that discourse. I need the average person to understand the depth and the abhorrentness of the amount of wealth that the church has, the amount of wealth that the church has. And if you can be part of that discourse and spreading that and even linking our video places, you don't even have to have that discussion yourself. Just say, go watch this. I did the work for you. You don't even have to explain it. But like, this is what we want. We need discourse about this before we ever see a shift, because I think the average person can look at taxing the Mormon church and going, yeah, they should be paying on taxes on that, because imagine how much welfare we could fund from a government perspective if we tax the Mormon churches, right? Like, that's a whole other argument in and of itself. But like, I think we can make some progress in this discourse if we use Mormonism as a very valid talking point in this religious equation.
So that's what we have for you today. that was intense.
That was a lot.
That was a lot. But we appreciate everybody for sticking around if you made it to this point. We did do a lot of work into we wrote a whole script and did a whole bunch of research. So if you could help us out by subscribing, if you aren't
and commenting
already,
your thoughts,
commenting, sharing this video where it might be appropriate, we would greatly appreciate that. You can also support us further by joining Patreon or becoming a member of the channel. The button's like right next to the subscribe button. We're doing watch parties right now. Join up for more information on that. We watch Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. That's out, new episodes now, and Surviving Mormonism with Heather
doing a
Gay.
watch party next week.
So yeah, I don't know when this is coming out, but there are watch
Tuesday.
Parties happening, right?
Or this week.
There's watch parties happening, so keep your eyes out open for those things. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we share all kinds of other things that probably don't get long enough video or aren't long enough to justify doing a whole episode on. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Jordan McKay on both of those platforms. Speaking of watch parties, we do them on our Discord server. So if you would like to join a community of like-minded people like us, it's not all about us. There's all kinds of other things that people mostly don't talk about us, which is how I would like it, actually. You can find the invite to that down in the description. And like I said, you have to be a member of the Discord in order to access those watch parties that we do. Anyway, thank you for sticking around, for engaging with these ideas with us. We appreciate everything that you do.
Tax the motherfucking churches.
Tax the motherfucking churches. And we'll see you next time.